So we're going to make a start. Thanks for everyone for joining today. So my name is Georgie. I'm co-founder of Sustainability Partnerships. I've got my co-founder here, Nathan, on the call today, and a really great lineup of speakers as well. Earth Day obviously is very, very important to us, and the theme of Earth Day this year is Invest in Our Planet. If you view the Earth Day site, you can see that their sort of raison d'etre for the day is this is the moment to change it all: the business climate, the political climate, and how to take action on climate. Now is the time for the unstoppable courage to preserve and protect our health, our families, and our livelihoods. So we're going to have a great discussion today on how some of the solutions that our guests have can have a great impact on climate change, on the preservation of our health, our livelihoods, and our families, and how we can really get push towards that sustainable future within our healthcare system here in the UK. As a bit of a refresher for everyone who has come into our events before, or if you're brand new to Sustainability Partnerships, instead of me trying to explain verbally, we've got a great video that I'm going to share with you now. Gives you a little bit of an insight as to who we are, what our goals are as an initiative, and what we're trying to produce as a sustainability partnership. So I'm going to share that now. If my colleagues can let me know that you can see my screen. Thanks. So I'll play that now. Let me know if you can hear. Yeah, so that's us. That's what we stand for. That's what we're trying to be, is that conduit between the private sector, amazing new sustainable innovations, and the healthcare system. So as the agenda is for today, we have Dan Scarborough, who's going to kick us off. He's the director at N0. We then have Georgie. He's going to give us an introduction to ACETECH and a bit about what those guys do. And then we're going to finish off with Itar, and he's going to give us an intro to AutoMedi and some of the innovations that those guys are going through today. We're then going to have a Q&A. If you have any questions specifically for any of our speakers, please put that in either the chat or the Q&A function. I really appreciate that everyone is already having a bit of a chat today. Please keep that going. Please speak to each other and have as much discussion and share as much of what you're doing as well. More than happy for anyone to share contact details. Please link up with each other and have those discussions yourself as well. That's what we're here for. We're the community. So I'm going to pass over to Dan, who's going to give us an intro to N0 and give us a bit of an insight as to what these guys are up to and how they can help towards a more sustainable future in the NHS. Dan, do you want to give us an introduction to yourself and N0?
Yeah, thanks very much, Georgia, and thank you very much for hosting us today. Really excited about being here and hoping that we can contribute positively to the discussion. So one of the challenges, I believe, and the reason why I'm working for N Zero, is that in order for us to reach zero carbon, you need to be able to accurately manage and understand in real time what your carbon emissions are. So N Zero is a carbon management platform that offers transparency and accurate 24/7 carbon accounting and emissions tracking. And I'm going to take you through a few things today, and hopefully people on the call will find it of interest. And we'd love to do some work with the NHS and various different NHS trusts to help them on their journey. So here we go. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, that we found, and that the organisations that we're working has found, is that 90% of firms can't measure their emissions correctly. The way organisations are reporting on their emissions is annually and retrospectively. And it's very difficult for those numbers to have a real impact unless you're understanding kind of the changes that you're making in your organisation and how they're helping you in much more real time on your way to N Zero. So I'll just work this out. So our product is a software product, and the aim of it is to really automate all the data that you're going to have to gather to understand the full emissions that you've got across both scope 1, 2, and 3, and then provide an accurate picture and also make it auditable so that when you're reporting, it's much more easier to pull all this information. To put it into perspective, when you're reporting on an average basis, the delta between the top level and the bottom level kind of create quite significant inaccurate data. This is augmented, or this is kind of highlighted by the fact that renewable energy doesn't happen. It's not a constant source of power. And we've seen that carbon emissions for different organizations, depending on where they are, can be, can be quite a big delta between what we're seeing and what is actually being reported. So to give you an example, this particular miscalculation for this office building could be up to kind of 225,000 kilograms of emissions underreported. It could also be overreported. And this is only when you're dealing with scope 2 emissions, so the electricity predominantly that you're consuming. Where it becomes even more challenging is when you get to scope 3 emissions. These, as we found, are very much kind of the largest and the hardest to calculate. And understanding the energy intensity of your supply chain can be very, very challenging. And understanding, the embodied carbon of the products that you're kind of using or the buildings that you're located in can also be very challenging. So the aim of this is to create a transparent opportunity for you to communicate with all your stakeholders, your customers, and everyone around the world, to kind of allow you to track the scope 1 emissions. So by collecting your data and calculating your carbon impacts on an immediate basis, and then also looking at your energy use on a 24/7 basis, and then also taking all of your indirect scope 3 emissions and reporting those as well, and syncing it into one kind of visual dashboard that allows you to kind of track your journey towards net zero. On the scope 2 emissions, there's the power that you consume, and there's the energy that's generated. Specifically in Europe, the renewable energy that is generated from a contractual perspective is, in terms of your RECs, your renewable energy credits and your guarantees of origin, that is really what demonstrates whether or not you are renewable. The challenge with the RECs and the GEOs that are kind of built into green tariffs that energy providers are offering is that they're not matched on an hourly basis currently. They're matched retrospectively on an annual basis. Sometimes they're matched on a biannual basis, over a 2-year period. What we can do with this platform is, once we've got a baseline of your actual carbon emissions, we can then do hourly matching of your energy that you're consuming with energy that's generated. We can also do that with renewable energy plants that are located close to wherever your particular asset is that you're building. And what is really quite interesting that we can do as well is there's complete transparency on the payments that are made for your documentation of your power consumption. One of the challenges today with the way that RECs and GEOs are built, are purchased, is that they're not having a material impact on net new renewable energy, because a significant amount of the money that is paid for RECs and GEOs goes to intermediaries. So a REC or a GEO can change hands between 8 and 15 times. The way that we're doing it is 80% of the amount that you're actually paying for the REC goes directly to the energy generating asset. The energy generators that we're working with as well have got a regeneration clause, so that when you're buying your REC, you can choose an energy generator that is investing that money back into net new renewable energy. Right, the next one, here you go. The way that the system works is, because of the nature of kind of renewables, if you like, they're only happening when the sun shines and the wind blows. It gives you an opportunity to really track your emissions on a granular basis. So the utility mix, the grid mix, can vary depending on where you are and what power is being generated at that given time. We get to a very granular level on what those emission factors are. And we also remove a lot of the contractual obligations that are happening with that energy mix. If someone's got a power purchase agreement with on-site with some solar, we remove that from the utility mix to give you a very accurate carbon intensity of that mix at any one time. So what does this do? So it gives you a baseline of your carbon emissions. It allows you to build reports and roadmaps to get to net zero. It saves you a lot of time on data collection and calculations. You avoid greenwashing. So, and you're able to hold your utility provider accountable by really understanding what you're buying from them from a renewable energy credits perspective, and you can tell a carbon story. You can understand the financial impact of decisions that you're making. So if you're investing in, a particular location or a particular product, you can understand what impact that's going to have on your journey towards zero carbon, and gain visibility across all three scopes. And I think that so one of the customers that we've got on the platform is the City of Reno in North America. And I'll show you their public-facing profile a bit later. But what that allows you to do is really engage with stakeholders and engage with other people who are trying to understand how organizations are tracking their journey towards net zero. And it also allows you to create reports. So from an annual reporting perspective, it allows you to document exactly what's going on. It meets minimum guidelines for current reporting, but it's also extending what you can do. And as legislation changes over the coming years and people are required to be much more granular in their carbon reporting, you're prepared for that process. And that's the presentation. And then I was just going to take you through the platform very quickly. I don't know how much time I've got. I'm hoping I'm all right for time.
You're fine for time, Dan. You've got another 5 minutes. We won't cut you off just yet.
Okay, cool. So just give me 1 second. Share screen. There you go. Yeah. Okay. So this is the base level. This is the top level of the platform. And as you can see, this is a makeshift city. You've got various different assets consolidated on the left, so a number of different fire stations, offices, parking, police stations, public services, hospitals, whatever that particular asset could be. It then gives you a consolidated view at the top level of what the cost on a almost a real-time basis. I think it's 99%. So as well as being a carbon system, it allows you to correctly understand what your costs are from an energy perspective. It's got the scope 1 emissions. So natural gas, diesel, fuel, anything. We dovetail into telematics, and you're going to hear from the next presenter about telematics. But any of your fleet, your vehicles, your mileage, we can display all of that. And we also do these are tailpipe scope 3 emissions, but we also do full kind of life cycle emissions. We've got I think it's around 480 database in the system around the carbon emissions from a Scope 3 perspective, but it's designed to be able to ingest any form of data on an accurate basis. This shows you kind of the daily profile of the power that's being consumed. In this particular fire station, they've got a solar on top, so it shows you the amount of the time of the amount of power that they're generating. They're also supplying power back to the grid, so you can see here the amount of power that they're supplying back to the grid, and it shows you how your particular asset is performing against the carbon intensity of the grid. So this particular fire station is producing 23% less carbon than the grid average at a given time, which can help you to make decisions as to where you should invest for more solar or what particular asset. So if you're in a location with a high degree of renewable energy, then there's not necessarily the requirement for you to invest in on-site power generation. It goes down to an hourly basis. So you can see again, it's a bit of an oxymoron because we're kind of advised to potentially charge our cars overnight, for instance, right? And you are led to believe that the tariffs are cheaper in many respects in an evening, but the carbon intensity in the evening of the grid is significantly more. So if you were going to do it from a renewables perspective, you would be charging your car during the day or during periods when there are high levels of renewable energy on the grid. And this system allows you to be able to do that as well. And then finally, from a reporting perspective, it's all you can download specific reports so that you can provide not only your internal stakeholder reports, but also your external reports from a compliance perspective, and it all automates that from a reporting perspective. This is the public-facing dashboard that the City of Reno uses in North America. It communicates to all its population about how they are meeting their climate goals, and it gives you a kind of this is all pulled from the system so that they can kind of keep their various stakeholders and communities abreast of what they're doing. And that's what we're up to. I hope you found it useful, and we would love to engage with the NHS on their journey towards net zero and see how we can support all the people that are participating in this platform. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan. That was great. You have a few questions already, which I will wait until the Q&A session at the end. I know that from our sustainability agenda session that we had in January, where we spoke to key stakeholders in the NHS, that the Scope 3 piece and really pushing responsibility down the supply chain is really, getting to be more up there on the agenda than just looking at what you are using yourself in terms of your carbon footprint. So that's really great to see that all of that can be integrated. And I know there is a question around that as well. It would be great to hear from everyone in the audience today, what your challenges actually are. Is it just finding that baseline? Is it the carbon reporting? Is it that future-proofing piece that Dan was talking about, and the level of granularity we're going to have to go with in the future? It would be great to hear any of that stuff. Also, great to see to hear what other people are doing for Earth Day today. Grace, you mentioned that you're going to be publishing your carbon report to celebrate Earth Day. So anything that anyone wants to share in terms of links in the chat, happy to see that. Any images or anything, please at us on Twitter. We are at sustain_partner. So we would love to see what you guys are doing, and we'll repost all that stuff as well. So we'll go straight into the presentation from Georgie, and we'll pick up on your questions with Dan in the Q&A at the end, if that's okay.
Yeah. Good. So shall I jump in?
Please.
Hi, everyone. Do. Good morning. Good morning. As I said, my name is Georgie. I'm from ACETECH. And as much as we're a technology company, I'm not the best with technology, but I'll do my best for you all. So what I'll do is I will run through our presentation, giving you an introduction to who we are as a company. As much as my title is a sales manager for the UK, I will do my best not to sell to you, but to give you really an outline of the challenges that are faced by the NHS, especially when it comes to their ambulance fleets, which are one of the largest producers of carbon and one of the most difficult to reduce and to measure. So hopefully I'll be able to give you an understanding on how ACETECH are helping various NHS fleets at the moment, but also globally. So who are we? We're a global leader in vehicle intelligence. I'll run through a bit more of that in regards to how that relates to the vehicles and what the intelligence side means. We do have a global reach. We don't just have a few vehicles here and there. We are touching across the world. Our customer focus, as you can see, is with over 50 countries. Our products, software and technology are on thousands of vehicles. So we have a massive amount of data that's able to show and measure exactly fuel usage, carbon emissions, sustainability, and how we can measure a baseline from that and then help reduce that. And we are multi-award winning, and they're independent awards. And I'm happy to share any details of our awards. If people want to get in touch, then I can steer them to our website, or I can send them individually. I'm happy to do so. And we're thought leaders. Thought leaders is that we are constantly, as a technology company, we're constantly thinking of new ways that we can adapt our software and our hardware to really run with the common or the current trends. And not that I want to use sustainability as a trend, because it's not a trend. It's something that we've got to move towards. And what we're finding is that with our assistance, with our data and with our products, they're actually helping people not just tick a box with a solar panel. We're actually helping them reduce their emissions, understand where they're using their emissions. And, you know, at the moment, there is a bit of a gap from what do we do with our current combustion engines before we move to zero technology, which I think we can all safely say is in touching distance, but it's a scary move. So our products. So sustainability solutions, Ava is a voice-activated system that we have that helps the driver to understand, you know, their foot is too heavy on the accelerator, they're braking too much, they're going around corners. One of the oldest ways of being able to reduce fuel usage, which in turn reduces emissions, was to train drivers how to drive in a more careful way. And that has been within the sector for a number of years. But what we're now doing is we're trying to bring in a technology which assists the drivers to do that. Solar, we all understand solar. I don't know how many of the people watching this at the moment are within the fleets. So solar is something that it's Marmite. Some people think that it does add a benefit to a fleet. Others think that it doesn't add enough. But what we've done is we've produced technology and data-based evidence to show if used in the correct way, it can make a difference. And eco-run is something that I'm probably going to focus on more within this presentation. So I may stop at that slide and use up my 10 or 15 minutes that I've got left to discuss that. And then we've got some nice symbols. So yeah, wear and tear. It's as well. It's something that adds into sustainability. The longer you can keep your tires running, the longer you can keep the engine running without having to replace it. It all goes to sustainability and reducing carbon emissions. So here is just if you like, a catalogue of our products. We can run from safety, from vehicle controls, asset management, asset intelligence. Asset intelligence is something that I'd like to try and fit into the discussion today, because it's not just a case of understanding where your assets are. So just an example, NHS fleets at the moment, an average fleet of around 400 to 600 vehicles. They have around 20 various parts within that vehicle, defibrillators, spine boards that are on and off, stretchers that are on and off all the time. And they can be left at a hospital or they can be left at a scene, which means that the driver has to return. So once again, if you're able to know where your product is, know that you're not to leave it behind or get an alert, then you're saving yourself that extra journey. Our green tech, which I'll definitely move on to, and emergency lighting. Once again, I could go on to emergency lighting, but there's technology out there that reduces the use of battery, which once again, with a combustion engine, reduces the use of the engine. So as you see, we've got our solar technology, our eco run, our driver coaching, asset intelligence, vision, which is a future product. I wish I could discuss now, but we're not going to have the time. And our EMS, our emergency service telematics, which all fits into this, which is a cloud-based software interface that allows you to be able to bring up reports, look at how your solar is working, look how your eco is working, look how your drivers are performing, and it all ties into everything we have here. And ACETECH Solar. Once again, if I could just briefly touch on solar. Solar technology has moved on massively over the years. It's no longer a 3-inch thick solar panel that sits on top of a vehicle. I mean, we're talking, millimeters thick of solar panels that can sit on the top of a vehicle now that can produce enough energy to run the batteries on your vehicles. And really, you're only limited to the size of the batteries and the energy the battery can consume. So what you're finding is that a lot of solar energy is being provided, but the batteries can only take up to a certain amount. So once it hits that amount, any excess energy that's left over is just thrown away. So if you look at combining your battery technology with your solar technology, once again, it can enhance the life cycle of the vehicle. So this is really where I think I'll stop the presentation before it goes into our awards and where we are. So currently we work with various NHS fleets in the UK. We work with private ambulance services across the world. We work with North American clients. We work in the Middle East. And we have successful and a lot of data that can show what we're capable and what we're actually doing. So what we've produced here is a product called Eco Run. Now, Eco Run is an intelligent control system that sits in the vehicle. And what it allows us to be able to monitor the vehicle, how the vehicle is running, the temperature it's running at, any idling times, fuel usage, and it measures all of this. And what it can do, it then controls the vehicle. Won't control the vehicle while the driver's driving. It won't control the vehicle if the handbrake isn't on. It controls the vehicle in an intelligent way that allows us to monitor, or allows Eco Run to monitor the vehicle. One of the biggest, I suppose, crimes of fleets is idling. Now, a vehicle can be left idling for up to hours. And rightly so, because the drivers, they want the passenger compartment or the patient compartment to be at a nice temperature. They want their driver compartment, if they're sitting on the side of the road, waiting on a call, to be at a temperature. And they also have medicine cabinets that need to be at a certain temperature. So when you have all of these, it's understandable that you leave the vehicle idling while the engine's running, the aircon is running, the engine heating is running, and it makes sense. What EcoRun does, EcoRun will monitor the temperatures in the patient compartment, monitor the temperature in the driver compartment, and also monitor the temperature in your med compartment. Once it sees all them temperatures are at optimum level, it will then stop the vehicle. And it will stop the vehicle from idling. And it will only come back on once the temperatures are dropped below a certain level. Now, these levels are all configurable. Everything is related and discussed with the client. So once the EcoRun understands that the vehicle is at its optimum temperature, you will get an alert to say EcoRun is being activated. The engine will then stop, and then it will sit and it will monitor the temperatures of the vehicle. And it will only activate again if the temperatures drop below a certain level. Now, what we've found with fleets of up to 600 vehicles or more is that when you look at idling time, that is responsible for anything up to 26% of your fuel usage. 26% of your fuel usage. When you look at that and you put that in monetary terms, and especially as we all know at the moment, the cost of fuel is astronomical. But then if you look at that from an emissions point of view, then 26% is a massive amount. Now we're able to, with the assistance of EcoRun, we're able to reduce that. And as many, and this is where I try not to be a salesman, but we can guarantee that saving, because, you know, we don't just have a system that switches off the vehicle and reduces the cost of your fuel bill, but we also have a dashboard that will show you how it saved that, what it saved. And then we can run a baseline on your emissions based on your vehicles. Now, it's with any project, you know, moving over to something like this, there is a transition. So it's understanding what vehicles you run, what ages they are, what emissions they're currently using. And then what we can do is we can integrate that into our software. We can configure that, and then we can produce reports that show you exactly what is being saved, how it's being saved, and where it can be improved. So not only from a green point of view, but from a financial point of view, our ACETECH EcoRun product is well, it's second to none. It's the only one on the market. Now, if you combine that with the solar and with our telematics, understanding how your fleet is running, where journeys can be saved, or where idling can be reduced, or where temperatures can be changed, and all of that be produced on reports and live reports, then it's just something that we feel once it's been demonstrated, and once people can see from a dashboard level what it can be done, that we've found that we've got a great return on people wanting to use our product. So from a sustainability point of view, EcoRun, without doubt, is what we're finding at the moment, is where fleets are transitioning into zero, into electric, hydrogen, which is a very scary prospect, because it's not just buying the vehicle, it's the infrastructure. What we find is we have a timeline over the next 5 to 10 years where this has to be reduced, and EcoRun sits in that position perfectly at the moment, where it allows you to start to reduce your emissions, start to reduce your fuel costs, but also allows you to see where in the fleet you're best served to start changing and moving to electric, if that's where you're going to be going and that's the direction you're going to be taking. So rather than looking at 600 vehicles, how do we change those 600 vehicles to electric over the next amount of years? You can actually see from the software, from our dashboards, and from the data, and that really is key. It's the data that we can provide. Once you see that from the data, you're able then to optimize the effectiveness on where you start to reduce your fleet's capacity from using combustion to electric or to hydrogen or to whatever direction you're going to be moving in. So it's very difficult in 20 minutes to give you a great overview of who we are and what we do. It's just, I can only reassure you that EcoRun is a part of a system, and I suppose it's an ecosystem that ACETECH have that can help you not only reduce cost, but help you reduce emission, but can also help you to move from where you are at the moment, combustion, to a more sustainable solution.
No, that was a great rundown, Georgie. Thank you. There's so much to think about there. I mean, just thinking about the fact that emergency vehicles, it's not a normal vehicle. You don't just have to think about the emissions of a combustion engine. You have to think about every single, we talk about keeping that temperature stability within medicine cabinets. That's not a normal thing that normal vehicle owners have to worry about. I just have to worry about how much aircon I'm using in my car, and that's about it. And that idling time as well, it's really, really interesting. That 26% number has really stuck with me. I know that you piqued the interest of some other people who have got quite a bit of questions here for you. Again, we'll save that until the end. I would also be really interested in learning about your machine vision stuff, but we can pick that up separately just for my own interest.
Oh yeah, no, machine vision is just it's next level. Fantastic.
Yeah. No, it sounds super interesting. I think that what's really sort of coming out of this session and what's really interesting and exciting for me, just being a fan of sort of high-tech solutions and new technology, and obviously investing in innovation is the theme for this event as well, but just basically how data is really becoming the lifeblood of sustainable insight within the NHS and across the board. We talk about collaboration as part of sustainability partnerships, and I can see already if we're sharing data, if we're being collaborative, if we're being open source and open-minded about the way that we work with each other, we can work together to a more sustainable future. And I know that you and Dan are already speaking as well, and it would be great to see all the information that the telemetric stuff going into a dashboard like that. And I know that Itai as well, I feel like that there could be some great collaboration just between the people that we have on today, and I really feel that sharing, collaboration is really at the heart of how we're going to make a difference in the future. So thanks so much for that, Georgie. I really appreciate it. If you want to stop sharing your screen.
If I could just quickly say, I mean, data is king. If you've got the data and you physically can see exactly what your vehicle is doing from a fuel usage point of view or from an idling point of view, and it's real data, then it allows you to make some real key decisions without just thinking move to electric. It really is. Data is king. So I'll stop sharing and talking now. I'm getting on the flow now. I'm starting to get into it.
We should have given you the full hour.
Yeah, you don't want to do that, honestly.
Okay, thanks everyone again for all of your questions and for getting involved and for having your conversations in the chat as well. Please feel free to keep going with them. I'm going to pass straight on to you now, Itai, please, if you can share your screen and please give us an introduction to AutoMedi. You're still on mute there.
Let's try that. So, this is a sign of our time. I've got to test out whether I'm on mute or not. I'm assuming everybody can see the screen okay. Is that right? Presented. Perfect. Well, you've had the glamour so far, so it's now my turn, obviously. Thanks very much, Georgie, for having me, and obviously welcome to everybody else who's taken the time out to join us today. Now, I'd first of all thank again for turning out. And there are 14 slides in this talk, and I normally fluff my lines at least once. So if you fancy a bit of fun on a Friday, take a guess in the chat of how many lines I'm going to fluff, or what slide I'm going to fluff my lines on. I've already done a couple. You can't have those. And anybody who's right, I'm going to send a seed card to. Is that right? Right. So everybody, thanks very much for your time again. Right. So I also talk very quickly, so I must warn you, you have to listen hard. So who am I? So my name is Ethan. I'm going to talk today about circular economy. Now, I'm a mathematics technologist working to build, or really invent in a lot of cases, some of the scalable climate solutions needed in the interest of public health, climate, and economics. And I've helped organizations like the UNDP develop social accounting, decentralized micro and nano financing models for their work in the Middle East. I've also authored papers on health, climate, economics, and developed rapid viability systems to quickly compare quality of suppliers, life cycle carbon, and social value in tender submissions, for example, in the public and private sector. But I'm also a doer. The complex nature of socio-climate systems means we can't optimize our relationship with nature without actively developing solutions with our own hands. Ivory towers are an anathema to that, unfortunately, because their passivity risks becoming the most destructive force in the climate emergency. But unfortunately, wherever we look, there are millions of people talking, but precious few actually doing anything. Now, personally and professionally, I've developed a particular interest in circular economies and have developed what we call helical economics within Automedia, which adds a generational axis to bridge many of the gaps between circular and donut economic systems. Now, we use this within Automedia's circularity as a service when combining mechanical, chemical, biological plastic recycling with our decentralized fleet of 3D vending machines to turn plastic pollution into economically viable products with purpose, all under one roof. Now, in care, plastics have made so many things possible that would otherwise not have existed. But humans have made 8 billion tons of this stuff in the last 100 years or so. That's over a ton for every living human. And only recently have we actually started to recycle it. So 91% of the stuff that we've ever made is still here in its original form. And because we ship it, it's somewhere. And in reality, there's no such thing as single-use plastics, unfortunately. There's just single-use purposes. And our economies have ineffectively matched purpose to materials. And in healthcare, unfortunately, that's no exception. Now, plastic products don't exist in a vacuum, though. Its supply chain is a form of linear economy where every step accumulates emissions from the energy used to manufacture and store products, the plastic packaging from plastics that are used to wrap plastics in plastics, like pallets and boxes, and the fuel to transport and dispose of all this stuff. Not to mention failure risk for more moving parts in the supply chain. That makes it very hard to track. And in health, this typically means that a minimum of around 11.4 kilograms of CO2 is actually emitted per kilogram of plastics from each of the 133,000 tons of plastic the NHS disposes of each year on average. And this is not to mention the air pollution generated from the 5.9 billion miles just shipping this stuff around. And all of it comes back into the system as respiratory disorders, amongst other things. And this costs £345 million a year for the NHS to treat, and it's caused by its own supply chain. And it creates an extremely high carbon footprint because it uses high footprint products like inhalers, which cause thousands of times the global warming of carbon dioxide and creates future health demand all on its own. So preventing patients getting into this respiratory treatment cycle in the first place is actually a critical step in treating the cause on top of the de-prescribing and alternative inhaler prescription regimes that are going on at the moment. But the complexity doesn't actually stop there. Not all supply chains are actually created equal. How and where products are used makes a huge difference. And one example is face masks, disposable face masks. The face masks used by the general public typically have a footprint of around 52 grams. In a hospital, exactly that same mask emits around 1.4 kilograms of equivalent CO2 because of the hospital waste processing steps and also how it's brought into the organization and stored in the intermediate steps in the first place. As well as that, there's 22.1% of infectious hospital waste that actually is completely misclassified simply because of the risk associated with underclassifying it. And this results in health facilities incinerating tons of plastic it actually didn't need to. That's bad for the climate and actually bad for the wallets as well. Now, circular economies offer a very promising solution to all of this. They prevent waste ending up in landfill by capturing the waste at source and turning that waste into products, not destroying it through waste to energy or waste to landfill that's typically used in linear supply chains. Now, circular economies redirect to a processing facility, which then creates raw material for other industries. And this prevents the destruction of the plastics and the embodied CO2 that's also locked within it. Now, this bypasses many of the carbon-intensive steps in the linear process as well. And this kind of helps improve some of the wider determinants of health through social value by creating jobs in local area, etc. But better still, the tighter and closer you make the circular economies to you, the better the outcome, because it cuts out more transport, makes footprinting really easy, and the supply risk smaller, as well as delivering quickly, on demand, without storing significant or unnecessary inventory, and with potentially no minimum order quantities. And this cuts out up to 90 to 80% of the CO2, believe it or not, and sometimes up to 70% of the cost, while also making supplies more resilient by containing the entirety of that supply chain in one room in your building, which you used to store your waste in. Right? So just repurposing it. And this is now upcycling plastics into ancillary supplies for supporting departments like fixtures and fittings, coat hangers, tube racks, clips, clamps, etc. And these microeconomies put the whole cradle-to-cradle journey in one provider by default and are the easiest to work with. Now, to use a case study, this is what recently happened with our deployment in Greater Manchester, the REMAST project specifically. A circular microeconomy was hosted by a small community pharmacy, and it engaged a number of their care colleagues in the primary care to host outreach bins and then recycle the waste into products it made available to that community. And we sterilized things like air loops and cable twists from masts into scrunchie and hairband material, as well as cable twists, I think mentioned already. The rest was mixed together with collected medicine pots and inhaler mouthpieces and extruded into filaments, like this stuff. Right? This was then placed in our 3D printing fleet, and it was used to make cost-effective pill splitters, tweezers, cable ties, bird deterrents, whiteboard corners, because we always lose them, bookends, and more. And this creates a reusable, cost-effective, alternative, accessible set of products that saves more than 92% of the carbon and 80% of the cost of new products in that time. In the first few weeks, this transformed a significant amount of plastic mass per site without a significant overhead, in turn saving huge amounts of carbon dioxide. And working this way, it's effectively a carbon net negative technology because you're sucking future carbon out of the system, i.e. you're not emitting it in the first place. And this could save £35 million at scale from future respiratory demand by itself. And that's 9.9% of the NHS total. And as a one-price subscription, it's a really easy way for organizations to start on their journey in community or in hospital, because you just pay one price and we do the rest. Now, combining several of our different innovations, and there are multiple that go into the products and the service, this means 1 kilogram of plastics offsets the footprint of almost 680 kilograms of conventional products. And this extends the useful lifetime of plastics from single use to the decades or the centuries that these materials will actually be around for. And this creates a radical prospect. Take a circularity subscription. Pharmacies in the catchment make money autopilotally for every outreach bin that they place in wider community, and voila. You literally have not just new supplies, but a new economy as a whole. And this all means that full circular economies fall under the control of the organizations that actually need them, giving them unlimited possibilities and massive scale, actually, without significant coordination and capital overheads, allowing local policy to drive markets to deliver higher quality, more effective value for public money, while also comprehensively meeting public service responsibility to report to local and central government in real time. So how do we do this? If I was to give my tip, I'd probably share these. Firstly, you cannot change what you can't see. Dan is quite right in saying that. Find out how your processes work and physically measure their impacts, not only on the climate, but then back into your service as a whole, because healthcare receives the impact of emissions from every other industry, including itself. And this means most of the carbon calculators out there are little use to you because of that variation. And worse, sometimes they actually blame the wrong thing, which means that you could put a lot of money and time and effort trying to change the wrong thing for little benefit. So go and look for yourself, and if needed, take a specialist with you. Secondly, model multiple generations. Circular economies get better the more they're used. And because the plastic lasts hundreds of years, so should your model. Because that plastic doesn't stop just because a contract ends, right? And this is especially important if there's a break even between the linear and circular economies during the contract time. And it's important to note that carbon accounting is necessary, but not sufficient. It's not a carbon model. And you need to compare options across multiple life cycles for different products and with different footprints, which also have different healthcare impacts as a result. So the dynamics of the system are the important factor here, which unfortunately methods like health climate economics actually do, and most carbon accounting models actually don't. So using something that you can compare is crucial. And this means you have to optimize for the system, not the category. And the best suppliers take waste you already create and turn them into other plastic items that ordinarily you would have to buy and also accumulate carbon from. So whether that is facilities, histopathology, science, office admin, whatever, these systemic cross-categorical benefits save huge amounts of cash, which procurement can't or sometimes won't currently evaluate. And each time it doesn't, it causes 60 years of harm compared to pre-industrial times. So also procuring plug-and-play providers like Automedy means you're paying one monthly cost and your waste is transformed basically for the cost of energy. You also simplify management information for real-time decisions. So not only do you not spend money on conventional office supplies because you can make it from that waste, you get to know how much plastic you've saved from landfill, the number of products you've made, the cash saved, made in real time on top of your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. And of course, we would say, make circles tight. Less players in the life cycle, the less you lose sight of in terms of the scope 3 emissions. The less the reporting overhead, the easier it is to report on your green plan metrics. Tight circles mean one roof, one set of metrics in real time, always compliant, and the problem of long supply chains, which you lose sight of, suddenly starts to disappear. And finally, perhaps the most controversially, don't settle for the basics defined within PPN 0620 and 0621. These procurement notices didn't account for general evaluation variability, nor the fact that life cycle impacts are context dependent. The effects of this noise has an almost 10 times higher effect than robust evidence has on current procurement methods, which is one of the reasons why new procurement methods are being investigated. So the minimum of 1.4% climate criteria doesn't really cover above that noise. And this means the effect it has on suppliers sometimes is negligible. Most incumbents know this and may simply ignore it or do the bare minimum, for example, talking about irrelevant actions like changing LED lights on one hand, but then on the other hand, using it as an excuse, to choose different import paths from different sources, which might actually have larger carbon footprints on the other. And for example, increasing freight distances also. And this happens when silos are considered not the system as a whole. And this is quite a transformation that's required. And this lets both, not doing it this way, lets both the climate and colleagues down on top of continuing the impact it has on public health. So if you're serious about climate change and healthcare, as we all are in this room, you may as well build your own within your trust that goes beyond the basics. And the planet and the healthcare resourcing that goes with it doesn't really have the time to wait nor space for mistakes. And on that somber provocation, I'd like to thank you very much for listening. Here are a few references. If you need them, you might find them useful. They go in the slides, which we'll be giving out later. And I hand back to Georgia, and thank you very much for your time. Look forward to the panel.
Amazing, thank you. Another really, really interesting talk there with loads and loads of stats, I think, that were statted out for the day, but so much to take in. Circular economies is something that we've talked about quite a lot with other guests that we've had on, and the microeconomy piece is super interesting. It goes across the entire board of everything that is relating to healthcare. One of them particularly, I remember us talking about nutrition and making sure that we are procuring sustainably in terms of creating a local economy in that way as well. So that's really interesting to hear you bring that up. I think that, so Nathan and I have been running sustainability partnerships for just over a year now, and the consistent changes that we've seen in presentations that people have given on our sessions has been how granular we are getting with things, and that, as Dan said, greenwashing, it's no longer okay. Doing the bare minimum, as ACETECH says, it's no longer okay. And the amount of people who are becoming so much more passionate about it within the NHS, the kinds of job titles that we are seeing now within our community that didn't even exist a year ago, and how seriously people really are taking it, and the difference that we've seen in the granular way of viewing things, and how seriously and how deep dive we're going with things in comparison to just a year ago. We can see that people are, it's really, really getting down to that granular level and being taken a lot more seriously. So I really appreciate everyone's input today on that. So in terms of Q&A, it seems like that my panelists today have been industrious in terms of answering questions themselves, but one of them that we did have was about the slides and the presentations and everything. So I'll cover that off initially. sustainabilitypartnerships.uk is our website. This entire session plus all of the contact details, all of the slides will all be shared in the event write-up, which probably will be going live sometime at the beginning of next week. Everyone who's signed up to this event, you'll also get an email through with the link to that, so you'll be able to get all of the information there as well. I think that it would be good to maybe jump into some of the questions that you guys have answered people so that everyone on the call can hear. Let's go with the one that you're currently answering now, Esau, if you want to just tell us that verbally about recycling the blister packs.
Yeah, absolutely. Because blister packs are a bane for everybody in general. So people are aware it's a combined product. It's got foil on one side, which actually has economic value in its own right, and it has the plastic involved. Now, the short answer is we do, but we almost do that in the vast majority of cases straight to chemical. But that said, we do take some blister packs and use that as a bulking agent. So I'm kind of going to start looking at very thin stuff. So this is an example of a filament that we created from medicine pots and face masks. So the plastic within face masks is dumped in this. So we create basically recipes, much like you do ingredients for a cake. So we can support up to about 4% of other stuff, let's just say, within the mass of the material used to create this, depending on which part in the generational axis, if you like, the material is going to be used for. So the short answer is we can use it in two main ways. The first one is as a bulking agent. So if we have lots and lots of other mass, we're quite happy to put 4% of stuff as blister packs, or rather the foil, because that will be absorbed into the mix. And the second thing is through a chemical recycling process. So the short answer is yes.
Okay, great. If there's any follow-ups on that, I'm sure that you'll be able to go back. There was for you, Georgie, I know that you've replied, but it was about retrofitting the solar panels to different types of vehicles. I know that you have replied there, but did you want to go in a little bit more detail about that? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, so solar panels could be retrofitted to vehicles. That's not a problem. What I would always suggest is that you also install something that can measure what the solar panels are doing. It's very easy to fit a solar panel, retrofit it so it runs auxiliary batteries or feeds power to them batteries. But if you don't exactly understand how much power it's generating, what time of day, what type of temperate climate is better in, then you're just installing something, once again, I think, to tick a box to say you've got solar. But if you're able to tick a box or to install solar and then understand a certain type of lithium battery is much better to absorb 100% of the solar energy that's being provided, then yeah, that's the way to do it. So yes, it can be fitted, but I would always recommend fitting it with something that can measure what it's doing as well.
I wanted to ask as well, actually, Georgie, about what your view is on the future of battery technology as a whole, because lithium, for example, is, it's a finite mineral and it's found in countries that we don't necessarily always have the best relationships with. And I know that there's some technology being used to extract lithium from clay. And I wondered if you had any insight for us on the future of battery technology, how we're making it lighter for vehicles or any other tech that you guys are working on to really get the most out of the battery storage.
Yeah, so in regards to the batteries themselves, no, I wish I had some kind of nice story to give you what's happening in the future, but we are producing a technology and a software that allows you to maximize the batteries that you're currently using. So it's great to have lithium, and they can store a lot more and last a lot longer. But there is still a habit of large fleets. If there's something wrong with that battery, take it out, change it for a new one. And they have no idea that battery has a 5-year warranty or a 10-year warranty. So what they'll do is, just for ease, is see that something's not right, swap it and put a new one in, where we have the technology and the software and the dashboard that allows you to know whether that's still under warranty or not. But in regards to new technologies, no, I haven't got anything that I can really sort of, give you at the moment, apart from that we're trying to produce our batteries over here in the UK and not rely on imports, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, great. Dan, I know that you have answered some questions as well. One of them here I thought was really interesting, particularly about the renewable energy mix. Do you want to go into that? Can you explain a little bit more about that from the question that's been posed there?
Yeah, certainly. So maybe I'll give a little bit of background on scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions and how the system works, because I know there was another couple of questions. So the method N0 uses around scope 1 emissions is based on the resource. So for example, with gas, the system starts with the metered amount of natural gas used at the site and then multiplies it by a factor representing the carbon intensity of the burning of each of those units of gas, if you like. So if the total GHG emissions from natural gas, it takes Y times Z, where Y is the number of units burned and Z is the carbon intensity of a unit of natural gas. And then for scope 3 emissions, the system does a similar work. It imports the units of scope 3 activity. And if a particular scope 3 emission is identified as material to an operation, then our team sets up a strategy to automate or semi-automate the collection of the Y data, i.e. the amount of units. And then we use third-party scope 3 libraries as a value for carbon intensity. The library that we've got about 640 scope 3 emissions categories, which have been approved by the UK. But we're also researching different detailed estimates for various scope 3 inputs. And as one of your questions said, that is one of the complicated areas to really understand the energy intensity of the supply chain. And you just keep going, opening up Pandora's box, if you like, with that side of things, but it is possible. And then for scope 2, which is the renewable energy side of things, this is one of the most complicated because of the dynamic nature of the electric grid, but the system captures Y from the utility meter. We can get more granular data from submeters or from BMS systems. But when none of this is available, we can scrape the data from monthly utility bills, but identifying the carbon intensity of each kilowatt is more complex. So where possible, we obtain Z from the actual generator used to meet the customer's need, which is called market-based reporting per GHGP. And this is possible where there's a PPA or a financial instrument of certification to match the consumption to the generation source. And where we can't identify the generation source, we use grid average values or location-based reporting per GHGP to supply the carbon intensity value. And that uses grid average carbon intensity for the location and the time frame within which that power was generated. Most reporting today uses this method, but relies on an annual carbon intensity, which is legally permissible if no better data is available, but it's not correct. And we would only fall back on annual carbon intensity where there's no better value for the carbon intensity. But we've already got an internal model that provides hourly values for North America and Europe, and we're expanding that to other markets globally. But we can also accept third-party data for that value. I hope that makes sense. It's a bit complicated, so I read some of it.
No, that's great. And again, you know, the part about accepting that third-party data is all about collaboration. It's about breaking down silos, as everyone's mentioned, breaking down the walls and seeing that, making sure that we're able to get as much data sources as possible to make the most insight as possible. I thought what was really cool was that you were able to I frame in some of those graphs into that outward facing website as well. And I know that a lot of the trusts that we've spoken to and who are here today, you know, transparency is really at the core of what they want to, what they hold important to show outwardly.
Well,
some of the changes they're making.
I think probably the challenge for any company anywhere in the world is that, you know, ultimately they're reliant on the energy that's generated by the grid in order to be renewable, right? But holding the utility accountable to what they're providing and making sure that they're providing it on a granular basis is really challenging, because the way that the energy markets work in Europe is it's all around documentation. So, you know, it doesn't really matter what you consume, it's how it's documented. It's the paper trail around the power that's generated that you're actually consuming. And because there's no granularity in how that's done, there's a lot of people that are kind of buying green energy tariffs, but the green energy that they're purchasing has been procured in, or has been generated in, say, July, but they're procuring power for the whole year, and they're spreading these energy certificates that were generated over the summer months using solar across the whole year. So that's really the challenge that we've got, is kind of driving the renewable energy transition of the grid and holding utility providers accountable for what they're selling as green tariffs, if you like.
Yeah, for sure. And I know that obviously we just need to, there's not going to be a solution overnight, and there's not something that someone can just turn on a magic light and say, hey, there you are, everything's from wind. We need to just endeavor to do the best as we can, and as you say, push that responsibility down the supply chain and hold people as accountable as possible, and become wise to when the wool's being pulled a little bit, and sharing insight like you are, Dan, again, really deep diving into the data and making things more usable. And I really loved your I'm a big fan of UX anyway, but I really loved your interface, and I think that for anyone who isn't a data scientist, having that information in front of them in a really usable way is really important as well, because I feel the wool gets pulled when you're just met with loads of data that you can't actually, as a normal person, pull any insight from.
No, I mean, I think I was speaking to a friend of mine recently, and we were talking about this journey to net zero, and everyone's making these commitments, right? But anyone, all they want to know is, what's the plan? How are people going to do it? Where exactly are we, and how are we going to get there? And transparent, honest approach to the problem, instead of, it's very difficult to know what to believe when you're bombarded by all this information all the time. So hopefully we're going to do something about it. And thanks again for hosting us today.
No, that's great. Nathan, did you have any questions for our panelists? And do panelists have any questions for each other? Because I'd love to hear you guys quiz each other a little bit on what you've talked about today.
Can I ask Itar one just about 3D printing? Obviously, it's been around quite a while in medicine, and we're printing food and everything now. It's always been a speed issue, though, in terms of the 3D print. Are we seeing increases in speed?
We are, that's right. I mean, there's a thing called the Benchy test. Now, if people are interested in that sort of stuff, you can go and look online. But people have created a new Benchy, basically that old boat that kind of comes on. That's become iconic. There are increases in speed, but if you think about what we do with supply chains at the moment, we make millions of items in a factory somewhere.
Yeah.
Pack it all into a truck or more than one truck, put it on a set of container ships, move it all the way here, and then distribute it to the end user positions. Distribute all those million items rather to the end user position. Now, the problem that we have with that is that you're obviously shipping a lot of stuff, but also at the end of the day, one person wants to use one thing at one particular moment in time. When you have vertical scaling like that, you have to scale everything, including the poser. But actually, when you start to break it down and ask the question, how many does one person actually go through in a day, and how fast can we produce things at the same time? You can then decouple it and make the demand side manage the demand for stuff. So what that means is that in general, for example, if I'll give you one example from a GP who we worked with probably about a year and a bit ago now. They said to us, well, we have to buy a minimum order of stuff. We've had to buy 300 of these things, very intimate examination things. But that's the minimum they could buy. So they were stuck with this stuff. They've had it for 3 years in their basement, being able to do nothing with it because they've had to buy too much. There's no smaller order quantity. So what our thing effectively does is say, well, listen, it is slower than injection molding something immediately. But the two things that are better about it is the per unit energy is substantially lower. So typically, for example, a machine will create a million items, or probably 100 items every single injection molding cycle. But that's typically done at 4,800 watts. So it's not as 4.8 kilowatts every single time it does that. Right? Ours is 30 watts by comparison, and we can do that on an hourly basis to create a block. Now, do you remember the old Airfix blocks? That becomes your structure. So you get this block that looks really weird. Off the back of that, you can just shred it, if that makes sense, with your own hand, and you get lots and lots of items, typically 100, between 20 and 100 at a time. So what you're doing is, while there is a slowdown on an individual speed basis, it allows you to do things you couldn't do before. And also, it allows you to save plastic. So one example of that, if I may, is this is a part that we use within these machines. The machines test themselves effectively by printing their own parts, or print the parts of their neighbor. And this only has 10% of the plastic that you would normally produce in it because it's 3D printed. So the infill itself is tiny. It's 10% of the actual material. And by being able to do that, you're cutting out the long or large part of the journey, if you like, across the the print bed. So because you're then just making sort of grid lines inside instead of the entirety of the structure. And as long as you engineer it correctly, that means that actually the speed difference in the individual case is a lot lower, but crucially, you don't have the delivery time. Yeah. See what I mean? Which means that the overall end-to-end cycle is substantially reduced as a result of it. But what you do as a pharmacy or something like that is you'll know how many you sell anyway, make that stack only as an initial set, and then you sell those to people. And every time you sell one, the machine automatically ends up creating another one. So you've always got this stack of stuff.
Cycle, yeah. One thing I did see a while back now, a few years ago, there was a girl who was paralyzed and couldn't walk. Well, not paralyzed, but literally couldn't walk. And they 3D printed her at a frame, it enabled her to walk. But one of the parts broke on there. And within the next day, they just printed one off, and there you go. And you mentioned injection molding. This thing was a unique object to her that enabled her, gave her life, which was fantastic. Like I say, the everyday objects, you can bulk them up and just keep them stocked. And
that's right.
I think there's a massive future for it in all industries. It's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely think so. Sure.
Thank you.
I think it's also worth saying about kind of the mass parallel scale thing. I probably should mention that. When you deploy enough of these around the country, you can get your 1 million items in minutes by comparison to waiting for a cycle to be made in a factory. So the idea is the jobs get distributed through the entire fleet wherever they are in the country. So that means everybody gets it on the demand side whenever they need it. And the key point is it's whenever they need it, not whenever they can be delivered. See what I mean? Which is obviously a different kettle of fish. There's a change to the economic thinking that we've had previously.
No, thank you. Answer my question.
There was a question that Dan has replied to here as well. At the moment, third-party audit of emission data is not mandatory in the UK. Do you think it's near to the future? And I mean, Dan sort of explained better than I would, but what I was going to say to that is what we always see in terms of trend is that something becomes trendy and interesting, then it becomes the norm, and then it becomes regulation, doesn't it? That's always the way that things go. So when we talked about the third-party audit of data, emission data, yes, it like people like Dan are saying, oh yeah, we can look at that now, but it's all about that future proofing piece, because as I said, in the last year we've seen how differently people are reporting and how granular things have got. It's only going to get more serious in the future. Does anyone else have any other comments on that point?
I could put my economics and mathematical modelling hat on for a bit. I think I think what's been said so far about the difficulties in getting scope 3 emissions overall is spot on, which is one of the reasons why we contain our circular economy in one space. That means it's us, and you only have to talk to us, if that makes any sense. But equally, what's important from an economic perspective is, from a carbon modelling perspective, is the ability to accurately position, if that makes sense, your carbon setups. That means that in the event that you have missing data, which is quite common, there has to be effectively a forensic exercise to kind of almost find out what that is, because it gives you a series of possibilities where, although the combinatorics of where it could be are high when you look at it in the first instance, what you get is you get a clustering effect when you coast it through a bit of algebra, let's just say. And that can give you a position where there are actually only 6 or 7 different futures or possibilities that it could actually be. These are called attractors within these systems. So what that means is that you can actually then go and look at what these 7 things are telling you to see if the conditions that have been generated by these clusterings actually do exist in real life, if that makes sense. So it's it radically reduces the search space you've actually got to go through. And we had to do this at the United Nations in 2012 when there was a lot of economic activity happening in Jordan, the country that is. But people didn't know why. They were like, well, how is this stuff actually occurring? Because there's no more money in, no more money going out. There's no foreign direct investment changes. How is this stuff actually occurring? And the exercise for us was forensic because nobody knew, nobody could find it. So what you had to do was to run what's called a matrix raking exercise, to kind of keep the marginals on an input-output matrix without going into too much details consistent, and then run this process to find a variation which was very, very small, insignificant. At that point, you then understood where your solutions were, and you can start to then build out an understanding of where you should then look to go and find where this magic was happening. So there was quite an interesting exercise, and that same process can actually happen in carbon as well as economic change. So it's quite an interesting sort of space that is kind of ripe, if you like, for data disruption in terms of the science and analytics space, for sure.
Just as a kind of an analogy, if you look at the advances that have happened in terms of like things like Google, right? You can type into Google and you can get a search within milliseconds for anything that you could possibly think about, right? So the instantaneous nature of data and how data is available, you know, that proliferation of that into our emissions data and our personal carbon consumption, companies' carbon consumption, it's inevitable if we're going to get to this point of zero carbon. The kind of AI or real-time nature of carbon emissions has to happen so that we can really truly get towards something that is going to prevent, you know, the catalytic event or the, you know, extinction level event that we're talking about with climate change. You know, I think, and as that momentum builds and people become more aware of the impact of what we're doing, which I think has, as you said earlier, has gathered so much momentum in the last year, you know, there's going to be more and more stuff out there that's going to allow you to understand your end-to-end emissions. Your companies will have to report it. It's going to be an obligation, not a, you know, not an optional thing. It's going to be front and center of everything that we do, I think, over the coming years.
Someone did mention here that Tesla has claimed to have developed new high charge density batteries that don't depend on lithium, which is just super interesting to hear about. If anyone was going to do it, it was going to be Elon Musk. If you got your hand up, you don't have to put your hand up. You can just shout out.
I like to be polite. What can I say? No, I think I was actually going to ask a question to everybody else. Do people think, can people see a future where we're reporting carbon the same way we report accounts to Companies House and HMRC?
I think, yeah, 100%. And I don't think we're reporting accounts to HMRC particularly well at the moment, right? So it's not granular enough. I think it's going to be significantly more granular than that. I've been looking at Teslas, and I was at the Tesla doing a test drive at the weekend. And the guy there was saying that, I think, was it 90% of the batteries are recyclable? I can't remember, but there's a significant amount of the battery that is actually recyclable. You know, and I was very impressed by that. I also think that one of the other things that we've done over the last few years is, you know, because cars are now, automotive manufacturers are now accountable for the end-to-end emissions of the car. You know, you've seen a lot of these gigafactories kind of developed in places like Norway and Sweden, where they're running off 100% hydropower, as opposed to where historically they were in Poland, which is a lot more dependent on fossil fuels. So you're trying to, you know, lots of the larger organizations are trying to procure from organizations that have got 100% renewable energy as part of their manufacturing process.
I thought for a moment now you were going to say a bad thing about Tesla, so I don't say that. I think I'm really green driving one.
I was going to say, you and Nathan can talk about Teslas maybe on your own time a little bit. So what I wanted to do before rounding off was maybe just speaking to everyone to find out what they think is going to be the most important innovation when it comes to sustainability in the future, as that is the theme for today. If you want to start off, Dan.
Yeah, no pressure there. Has anyone seen that film Time, where people have got a clock? I can't remember the actor, but they've actually got a watch that, and people are purchasing time, and time becomes the commodity that everyone's using.
Yeah, it's Justin Timberlake, right?
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. I think there's going to be an equivalent to carbon from that perspective.
Wow.
I think everyone on the planet will have, well, at least in the developed nations, will have a carbon allocation. And it will be used to kind of, control is probably a bit of a strong word, but we use control, but to control what people are doing and what people are consuming. I think that's something that could potentially happen further down the line.
Wow. I mean, when I said the future, that's like proper sci-fi Logan's Run type of, you know, future. But yeah, no, that's really, really cool. Super interesting concept.
Who would have thought Justin Timberlake is going to change the world?
Yes, but just to add to that, there's a book that if anyone's interested in, that's written by a guy called Mo Gaudat called Scary Smart, and it looks at AI and how AI is developing and the fact that it is scary because of what the potential of AI can do. But you know, where we are with that kind of autonomous thought process from machines and the ability for machines to do things much faster than humans can is going to naturally accelerate sci-fi and where we're going with sci-fi with things like managing the impact that we're having on the planet. But again, I read too much. I drink too much tequila as well, which isn't a good combination.
Very well so.
Thanks, Dan. The pressure's off now then. Over to you, Georgie. What do you think about the future of innovation for sustainability?
So what do I think is going to be the biggest change, or how the biggest change is going to come? Us. Simple.
Humans.
We've all got to make that change, haven't we? Mm-hmm. From the person who's starting to recycle at home, from the large OEM manufacturers, to the large companies. It's us, isn't it? I think it's without sounding pretentious, it's simple until we all understand what our role is to make that change. You know, here I am with my product, and I'm pushing it into and working with NHS fleets and working with fleets around the world. You feel that you're making a difference, but really what you need is you need us as a collective to make that difference.
Not everyone's bothered, are they? You know, it's an attitude. I spoke on a sustainability panel the other week at a print conference, and when a guy after me having a drink next to me, and it's all about profit though, isn't it? I said, not really. You know, and that's the attitude, you know, multi-million-pound business that you've got, and that's what you've got to contend with. And it's not just businesses, it's down to the lower level, you know, the kids these days, the attitude. I think they're bringing into the curriculum now more about nature and, you know, damage on the planet, which it starts at that level. And if you look around towns and cities that litter everywhere, there's the fraction of people that are concerned about what's going on compared to those that don't care. I think it's quite frightening. When you're right. You can have all the innovation in the world, but, you know, if you don't care, then...
And also, so it's for people who are still too sceptical. And I think that somehow has to be led from a government level, has to be led from big business level. And I think that once you get rid of people's skepticism of not climate change, but on how that can be achieved, then we're on to a winner.
I agree.
But you know, I work with fleet managers that you know have been running their fleets for 20, 30 years, and you know these guys are sticklers for old school ways. And when you see them actually not wanting to bring in a product just to tick a box, they want to bring in a product to make that change, then you feel that there is a change happening. So, you know, I'm not being negative. I'm definitely not being skeptical. I'm positive about the change. And once again, with what Dan is doing and everything, I think data is key. Data is key, showing people that this does make a change from the smallest level to the highest. Is important, is that people can actually see how it is doing it, not just being told.
Isa, did you have anything different to say to this? Because I don't know how we could possibly add to what's been mentioned.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things. I think obviously I would say circular economy because they will, because we have to think circularly about everything, even plants and our own lives, dare I say. But also we've got to move away to some degree from currency in its traditional sense. I mean, one example is that at the moment, about 51% of the world has no access to healthcare equipment in any form, whether even basic stuff like splints they don't have access to. But actually, that stuff is one of the easiest things you can 3D print. As you were saying earlier, Nathan, it's spot on. It's the fact that you can actually use this stuff for real world use cases. But that's predicated on larger organizations having the infrastructure in place, including roads, including energy, etc. But actually, these things are so low power, you can run them off a solar panel and take them with you. Just drop them in the middle of a disconnected community, and there you go. You can literally take bottles that you find in the street, turn them into filament, use them in this thing. So what you've now got is the potential ability to democratize all the stuff that traditionally has been centralized in a lot of places. And that now allows people who wouldn't traditionally have had access to stuff to have access to stuff. And that means the waste that we've been producing already and shipping across the world to, you know, the Far East or parts of Africa suddenly becomes a currency or a commodity, much like scrap metal is. And as a result, you then start thinking about waste very, very differently. And now it has value. So I think for us, that's a kind of shifting in thinking is going to be key here. But also, I think that this is going to be driven by people much more than governments and big businesses. Because frankly, look where governments have got us. Look where businesses have got us to. So, and what we'll find is that clusters of people working together, kind of SDG 17, partnerships for the goals, will be the thing that actually drives that change. It will be up to us, and we've got to start now.
Sure. I mean, I think that you're all right. It starts at a grassroots level, because grassroots then changes government, then enforces business. So I'm going to have to just plug a few of the other events that we have coming up before we leave today. So we've got our flagship event, Sustainability Day of Action on the 8th of June, where we're going to have some sessions in the morning dedicated to the challenges being posed from individuals from the NHS. And then in the afternoon, we'll have some solution providers, hopefully giving some answers to the questions posed from the morning sessions. In July, on the 7th, we've got the Removing Plastics from the NHS. We did this event last year, and it proved to be one of our most popular throughout the year. So we're running that again this year. We will have another few events through September, October, November. We've got the Sustainability Awards. So there'll be more information on that coming up throughout the year. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who took the time to sign up and attend today. All the questions asked, we absolutely love how involved and engaged our audience is, and how many questions and how interested you've been with the panel. Obviously, a huge thank you to everyone on the panel, to Dan, Georgie and Itai. You've been really, really interesting, all of your presentations. It's been really engaging and really interesting and insightful to watch and to listen to. Thanks to Nathan always as being my right-hand man on these events, and to our community in general, and always supporting us. Everything will go out on our blog. It'll be across social. Everyone will get an email about it as well. So happy Earth Day to everyone. Thanks so much for everyone's time, and we'll see you again at the next event.
Thank you very much indeed.
Georgie, thanks everyone.